F. Scott Fitzgerald famously said, to be kind is more important than to be right. Many times what people need is not a brilliant mind that speaks, but rather a special heart that listens. We have this nature's instinct as humans where it's almost human nature, where we think we can immediately solve everybody's problems regardless of what they're going through. We always have the answer, right? We always can jump in and we can always solve it. And that's not the case with empathy. Empathy is no longer a soft skill. It's actually one of the hardest to learn. And as the next 5 years, I think, progresses, we're going to have about 5 different generations in the workplace. So empathy is going to be it's going to be more valuable than ever when you have 20-year-olds dealing with 70-year-olds, and how do they understand each other? And how do they, help each other through situations when they're from completely different backgrounds and completely different generations? So the perception of empathy, and I know we're in a recording here, I have a slide that I'll be showing, but I like to ask a question. And what I do is I'll ask everybody to raise their hand once I ask this first question, and then don't put it down until you can say no to the question. So the first question is, who here has been into a car accident? My hand is up as well, as the majority of us have probably been in a car accident, right? Second question is, who here has been in a car accident and been severely injured? Now, your hand may still be up. My hand is still up. Final question is, who here has been in a car accident, been severely injured, and lost somebody that they loved? And most of the time, at even my live presentations, my hand is usually the only one finally still up. So can somebody who answered yes to the first question relate to me for what I went through? I was in a car accident. My girlfriend died. I walked away. She didn't. So when somebody says, yeah, I was in a car accident and I broke my collarbone, so I know what you're feeling. To me, that's the biggest turnoff, and that's the quickest way to get me to shut down completely and not want to share anything with you. So you have to be aware of, again, that human nature instinct that we have of trying to immediately solve problems. I don't need somebody to immediately jump in and say, yeah, I was in an accident too, so I know what you're going through. I just need you to listen. Maybe I just need to vent, or maybe I just need to, explain how it made me feel. As the person on the receiving end, it's going to be your job to decide or decipher what I need from you. And it's not easy. It's a tricky thing. So we asked the question, what is empathy? If you Google empathy right now, the first definition you're probably going to see is empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Okay, now within that, we have grasping the facts, feelings, and significance of another person's story. And then being able to communicate your accurate perceptions to that person, right? And it's also the ability to convey an understanding through words, gestures, and facial expressions. We often think about, well, what are we going to say? What are we going to respond with when somebody says something? But how do you react with your facial expressions? If I'll just use a personal example as an example here. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, my cat just died, if your first instinct is to go, your face clenches back, what does that tell them about what you're feeling and what you can offer them? Are they going to not want to share because maybe they feel like they're negatively affecting you? It's a balancing act, right? You have to figure out, one of the biggest things is empathy is not about you, right? It's about them. You have to make it about them. You have to be very aware of how you're going to respond and how you're going to react to what they're telling you. Within the empathy framework, I guess there are 3 primary types of empathy, right? So cognitive empathy would be the first one. And I have a picture of Homer Simpson here, and in a quote, which is what he actually said to his wife in an episode, is just because I don't care doesn't mean I don't understand. This is cognitive empathy in a nutshell, right? It's only about perspective taking. You're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but you're only giving them empathy by thought rather than by feeling. I am not the most empathetic person in the world. I am comfortable admitting that. I fall in this cognitive empathy realm, right? I know I need to be better in how I approach things and how I react to people, right? And a lot of times it's because maybe I'm just too busy. I have a lot of stuff going on. I want to be there for other people, but I may know what they're going through, but I may not really necessarily have the time to devote to them. So I need to figure out what I can offer them in the limited time that I feel like I want to offer them. And then emotional empathy, right? Personal distress. It's an emotional contagion. It's feeling another person's emotions alongside of them. And this can be good or bad, right? You think about the good of dealing with empathy, right? It's positive, you have pride, you're happy, you can help somebody, is empathy, hope, and faith and joy. But there's also a negative aspect, right? It's hate, fear, and regret, and guilt, or maybe shame, right? Like with my accident, there was shame with me, not shame necessarily, because I just felt bad about it, right? I had a suspended driver's license. I shouldn't have been driving. It wasn't my fault, but I did feel shame for a long time. So again, just because you've been into a car accident doesn't mean you can relate to me on any level whatsoever. And you shouldn't try to do that with somebody. And then finally, compassionate empathy. This is probably the most authentic form of empathy, right? It provides space for mutuality, dialogue, and reciprocation are possible with this because you're actually putting yourself in their shoes and you want to know what they're actually going through, right? It feels what it triggers within us. And in turn, it does help to develop those stronger bonds and those relationships in the workplace. Now, as everybody here, or the majority of people here, I'm assuming are project managers, I'm assuming that many people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's, based off of the, motivators for our needs and our wants, right, of our everyday lives. It starts at the bottom with the physiological needs. Right? We all need air, we all need water, we all need food, we all need clothing, right? Then it moves up to safety needs, personal security, employment. We keep moving up, love and belonging, move up a next tier, esteem, and finally self-actualization, to be the best person that we can actually be, right? That desire. Now, I like to touch on this because within empathy, you have to figure out, and again, not a soft skill, right? Within 5 seconds, 10 seconds of somebody sharing their story, you have to figure out where they're at on this chart. And if you can figure that out and you can make that connection, you're going to make that bond much stronger. And it's going to be an easier pathway to help them get through and overcome what they need to get through. And then we have, I touched earlier on the different generations coming into the workplace and how we can interact with each other there. We also have, empathy and differences from cultural standpoints, gender standpoints, sexuality, race, ethnicity, religion, and any other types of differences between people that you can think of. Empathy does require that active effort to let someone know that we're making the effort to understand and feel what it is like to be them as much as we can. But that's tricky when it comes to, culture, gender, race, right? Race and politics, two hot spots in our country right now, in the United States anyway. But can I understand what somebody from a different race is going through? I'm a white man and live near the beach. I don't have any problems with harassments or being, discriminated against because of the color of my skin. So I can't act like I know what somebody else is going through, but I can make that effort to understand what they're going through. I can ask them questions. How does it make you feel? What are your reactions? What do you get when somebody does that to you? I can make that effort to try to connect with them. And then when you're trying to embrace that diversity with empathy, it's all about just being authentic. Self-managing yourself. Don't try to solve everything right away. Make it about them. It's not about you. Practice active listening. Sometimes many people, we go back to that quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald. They just need that heart that listens. Participate with them and experience what they're going through, but you need figure out what level of participation they need from you first before jumping into it. Because again, if you jump into it, it can overwhelm them and you may overtake their feelings or their concerns with your own, and that's going to make somebody push back on that, right? And then finally, respecting their needs, respecting what they're hoping to get out of it, and connecting with them on that personal level. I like to touch on a few things about what empathy is and what empathy is not, because it's when you're dealing with empathy, you need to be fully present with others, right? You're trying to master that art of active listening. You're tuning into their nonverbal communication, right? Which when they're talking to you, what are they doing? Do they have their arms crossed over their shoulders? Are they trying to be withdrawn? Maybe they are ashamed of what they're going through. How can you make them feel comfortable enough let their guard down, put those arms down, right? Make them try to be a little bit, make yourself be more welcoming, right? And then instead of making it about you and offering all the advice that you can, again, ask questions. How does it make you feel? I bet used to do this, or try to figure out a way to ask them a question to get more out of them. Again, making it more about them. What empathy is not sympathy. People seem to get these two confused quite a bit. Sympathy is being sorry that somebody else is in pain, right? It's more associated with cognitive empathy, right? You understand what they're going through, but again, you may not necessarily care. You're sorry that they're in the pain. Whereas in empathy, you're actually feeling their pain. You want to know what they're going through. Again, you're asking those questions. You're making that effort to participate with them. Empathy is not simply agreeing with someone. You're not there to just be a yes man for them. Sometimes it's you're not there to be a yes man, but you are there to, again, not overwhelm the situation. But if you're asking the right questions and you're getting what you need from them, this is a very simple talking point to get through. Empathy is not pretending to understand when you don't. Again, cognitive empathy. Don't assume that you know what they're going through, because that's going to be a turnoff. Again, they're not going to want to come to you, and they're not going to want to share. In the workplace, that's going to be huge, because if people feel like they can't come to you and they feel like those relationships are deteriorating, you're going to weaken that culture, and you're going to weaken the overall strength of your team. And then finally, empathy is not taking on someone else's problems. You're not there to take on their burden. And whether, let's just say somebody's going to be late on a project, right? And they have 30 tasks to get through. It's not your job to take on those 30 tasks. It's your job as being an empathetic person to try to relate to them and say, hey, what can I offer you? What can I do to help you get through this? But you're not going to sit there and try to take it all off their shoulder, because that doesn't help them. Again, you want to help them get through their issue as best as you can. There's a case against empathy that I like to make, because as I touched on earlier, where I fall in this range, sometimes I'm just so busy and I have other stuff going on. While I may want to help people, it can be a burden to me, or it can be a burden to somebody else, right? Empathy can cause emotional burnout. If somebody keeps coming to you constantly, day after day, and all they're doing is, venting their problems to you, it's going to weigh on you. You can lose sight of your own self-well-being. You can be adversely affected by someone else's emotions. You can start to become negative yourself, right? But you can also become numb to the feeling of others, where, again, if somebody keeps venting to you day after day, you're just going to reach a point where maybe you just don't want to hear it anymore. And it's not that you're a bad person for that, but, as people, we can only take so much. Our emotional intelligence can only take so much. There are some people that can handle more, right? But there are those that aren't able to be empathetic and follow somebody and go along with somebody on that journey. And then it can make you hesitant to share your own feelings, right? If somebody's coming to you and like they're venting constantly, maybe you feel like they're being a burden, so you don't want to be that same burden to somebody else. So again, it's a balancing act, right? You have to figure out where you fall within that frame of how you can help people, how much you want to help people, and what efforts that you can make to get them through it.